Howdy Rovers! May is Older Americans Month, and this year's theme is Communities of Strength. We're asking you, our community, for help with a very special project. Send us one video, no longer than 2 minutes, with one success and one challenge from your life, as well as one hope for the future. Remember to include only your first name, then send it to us at R.O.V.E.R.S@aacounty.org by April 16th. I know that with your help, we can create something very special to celebrate our community. Thank you.
Hello everybody, my name is Virtual Ranger Nick, and I work for the U.S. Forest Service here in the Columbia River Gorge National Scenic Area. Today we are up on Larch Mountain, and we're going to go down the Oneonta Trail and talk about mushrooms. So while you're out in your local wilderness, local trails, anywhere out and about, you may have been seeing a lot of mushrooms, a lot of fungal activity. I bet you've asked yourself, what is a mushroom? And a mushroom is actually in a kingdom of its own. It's neither a plant nor an animal. Plants create food using chlorophyll and the sun to create everything they need to grow. And animals, they eat and actually digest their food to get the energy that we need. But fungi, they do neither of those. They use their mycelium and they go down and find plants, and they have a symbiotic relationship with these plants. So they take what they need from those plants, and they also give back to the plants. So they aren't just leeching off the plants. It's a hand-in-hand cooperation. Mushrooms are an extremely important part to the environment out here. Out in the woods, they not only decay rotting plant material and trees, but also the mushroom itself, the fruit, year after year. As it grows and dies, it adds a lot to the soil. And mushrooms' life cycle from the mycelium can last for years and years and seasons in the same spot and keep producing. While at the same time, as it releases spores, the spores will spread and create more mycelium in the woods that will in turn create more mushrooms. So the mushrooms are a very important part of the ecosystem in the area.
Do any wildlife eat mushrooms?
Wildlife do eat mushrooms. Lots of bugs and bigger critters eat mushrooms, and that's another way that their spores will get spread. And if you're very curious about what you're seeing out in the woods, I recommend getting yourself a guidebook. There's tons of guidebooks out there, and they all will have great information. But normally inside every guidebook, they will show you the different types of mushroom. Guild mushrooms, boletes, spine fungi, polypores, club coral, puffballs, earth balls, and earth stars, jelly-like fungi, cup fungi, morels, truffles, and odds and ends. So the actual mushroom's whole purpose is just to spread spores. And this is a little life cycle of a guild mushroom. So up here we have the mature mushroom, and that releases spores from its gills. And the spores go, blown by the wind, taken away by animals, and they land somewhere. If wherever they land is a habitable place for that mushroom, the mycelium will get into the ground and start to spread. And it could sit there for a while. Once the mycelium gets happy enough, it will start to throw off more fruit or mushrooms, and then the whole cycle repeats itself. It comes back up, creates the fruit, spores, the mushroom dies and goes back into the soil. So when you guys are out and about and you see a mushroom, I want you to think of the mushroom as like the flower, and know that this is just the tip of the iceberg. Under the ground, there's a network of mycelium traveling who knows how far. It's going all over the place. And the mycelium gets nutrients, and then what it wants to do is throw off this flower. And this flower pretty much is only here to reproduce. It doesn't really have any other purpose other than that, to spread the spores. Hello everybody, my name is Virtual Ranger Nick, and I work for the U.S. Forest Service here in the Columbia River Gorge National Scenic Area. Today we are up on Larch Mountain, and we're going to go down the Oneonta Trail and talk about mushrooms. So when most people think of mushrooms, they think of the mushrooms that you buy in the stores that have the stalks and the caps on them. Now here is a good example of what I would call an LBM, little brown mushroom out in the woods. And down here you can see here's a stalk coming up out of the dirt. Up here's the cap, and then on the underside of the cap This one actually has gills. Mushrooms have a few different types of features under their caps. This one just happens to have gills. So if you notice this little guy, it has a stalk, and then on the other side it does not have gills. It actually just has pores. So here we have this nice little cluster of LBMs, or little brown mushrooms. And all these things are the fruiting bodies of the mycelium that's under the ground. Right here, there's a whole network of more or less roots that are put off by the spores that come out of these mushrooms. And under here, you'll notice that there's gills. And the gills are where the spores drop out of, and that's how these mushrooms reproduce. When the time is right, the gills drop spores, and they're either carried away by the wind or by any other animals. And if they're lucky enough to land in an area that is right for them, the mycelium will go into the ground and start expanding. And then they will send off fruit bodies like this. Down here, we're actually looking at the mycelium as a whole. These little white filaments. This is what the fungi shoot out, and then enzymes get released out of these little filaments, and that would help break down this wood material. So here we have a great example of a very common type of fungi. This is a polypore called the red-belt conch. This thing is a great recycler. They cling on to this dead wood, and they really help decompose it. This also has a lot of medicinal uses. You'll see these all over the place in the woods. So this is another example of a polypore, this crust-like feature you see on this tree. Whenever you see these, it's always fun to get really close, take some time, look at it. You can see all these little moisture droplets coming out of here. And then what you can also do is take photos of this, go home and try to identify it. So right here, we got a little puffball mushroom. Out here in the Pacific Northwest, you'll see these all over the place. Lots of times you will remember these as a kid when you're walking around and you would stomp on them. And then when you stomp on them, poof, there would be this little dust cloud coming out. And for the most part, that helps these things because that little dust cloud are the spores that you're spreading. And then that would create more little puffball mushrooms. So here's something that you commonly see when you're out walking in the woods. These little jelly-looking features growing on trees. And this is some sort of jelly fungi. There's so many species of these, it's really hard to identify unless you have a microscope. And right now these are fruiting, that's why you can see them. If these aren't fruiting, they're kind of just dried up little spots on the trees. So this is the actual fruit body of these jelly fungi. So here on this dead stump, we have some sort of fungus. I have not actually seen this one before. So what I'm going to do is take some photos of this, go back to the office and do a bunch of research and see if I can't figure out what this is. But what fungus do greatly are recycle. Some of them, like this variety, it likes dead wood or other dead plant matter and will actually cling on to here and help break this down. If there weren't mushrooms and fungus out here in the forest, this would be a mess with just these logs that would take forever to decompose. So these things are great recyclers out here in the woods. So here on this rock, you'll see all these little black-tipped structures. And this might look like a mushroom, but it's actually a lichen. And all that lichen is a symbiotic relationship between an algae and a fungi. So what we're looking at here, this is called coral root. And it is actually in the orchid family of flowers. And while it might look like a fungi, it is not at all. But what this is a parasitic plant.